the 17th and 18th century, it was forced in Europe an economical, social, and political system, also known as the Old Regime. It is characterized by an economy based on agriculture and commercial trade. The political power was characterized by an absolute power of the king. The royal absolutism was seen as a divine right.
The society in the countries that followed the Christian religion was divided into three classes: the clergy, the nobility, and the people. The classes were strictly defined with their own obligations and rights. The clergy and the nobility were privileged classes that retained a lot of benefits. The people didn't retain any privileges. The society had weak social mobility, and only a few influential bourgeoisie were able to ascend to nobility through high positions. The inequalities created strong social tension, which made conflicts and disagreements frequent between the classes. Normally, these groups showed their power and fortune through their clothes, demonstrating the social inequalities. The clergy usually wore purple costumes and were known for their specific hairstyle, called tonsure. The nobles wore extravagant clothes, very detailed and bulky, with gold embroidery. They also had the privilege of owning swords. The bourgeoisie tried to copy the nobility's outfits. However, the nobles of the gown were black. The people wore simple and practical clothes with light tones. Only the higher classes had the possibility of wearing perfume. The social inequalities were also noticeable in the habitations of each group. The clergy lived in convents and monasteries. The nobility lived in their own lands where they had their palaces. However, there were times when the king would call some noble families to live with him in his palace. The bourgeoisie also lived in palaces. While these classes lived in luxury, the people lived in houses made of wood with bad condition.
The 18th century is known as the Age of Enlightenment as a result of the Enlightenment Initiative. The Enlightenment was a philosophical movement that happened in the 18th century. Its origin was in England and in Netherlands, spreading through the rest of Europe and the world soon after. This movement defended the dominion of reason over the theocentric vision that ruled in Europe since the Middle Age. According to some Enlightenment philosophers, this movement had the purpose of illuminating the darkness that hovered over the society. This ideal was defined by the critics toward the religious and political authority, by the affirmation of freedom, and by the trust in reason and the scientific progress as a means to achieve human happiness. The belief in the value of human reason as the motor of progress rapidly overflowed the scientific field to apply itself on the reflection of the function of societies in general. It was a common belief that the free use of reason will lead to the perfection of man, of the social relationships, and the forms of political power. That is, reason will be the light that will guide humanity. This metaphor that invokes a way out of the dark became a current reference whenever one wanted to highlight the accomplishments of the century and the new attitude towards knowledge. It was this intellectual movement that led and inspired the world to make new revolutions such as the French Revolution. The Enlightenment had the full support of the bourgeoisie due to the fact that the Illuminists and the bourgeoisie had similar interests. Even though they possessed huge quantities of money, they did not have power over political matters nor mercantilist practices. The valorization of reason, from which all men, no matter their social conditions, are enriched with, will establish a principle of equality, that is, for the mere fact of being human, every individual has certain rights and duties given by nature. This thought was defended by Enlightenment thinkers, who considered natural rights to be superior to the laws imposed by the government. The idea of a primary and universal right was fortified with the Enlightenment. It was also defined the basic set of rights inherent in human rights: the right to freedom, the right to justice, the right to own properties, and finally, the right to freedom of conscience. The Enlightenment supporters rebelled against the abuses of moral dignity implemented by the existing criminal law. In 1764, Cesar Beccaria published on Crimes and Punishments a controversial essay where she condemns the use of torture in interrogation the Inquisition's methods, and the barbaric way the sentences were fulfilled. It was people like Cesar Beccaria that contributed to the development of human fraternity. Justice softened in several countries of Europe. This humanism led to the abolition of slavery, which Portugal was the first to join.
John Locke was an English philosopher, one of the main representatives of the empiricism, a philosophical doctrine which affirmed that knowledge was determined by experience, both of external and internal origin, from reflections. In Locke's landmark, To a Treatise of Government, put forces of revolutionary ideas concerning the natural rights of man and the social contract. Both concepts not only steered waves in England, but also impacted the intellectual underpinnings that formed the later American and French revolutions. As England fell under a cloud of a possible revolution, Locke became a target of the government. While historical research has pointed to his lack of involvement in the incident, Locke was forced to leave England in 1683 due to a failed assassination attempt of King Charles II and his brother, what later came to be known as the Ree House Plot. John was forced to seek refuge in the Netherlands, where he lived in for 5 years. In 1689, when William of Orange ascended to the throne, he had to accept the Declaration of Rights presented by the Parliament, which Locke helped to compose.
During his exile in the Netherlands, John Locke wrote a letter concerning toleration, in which he says that the system's actions, especially on the religion theme, should be tolerant by the state as long as they play the role of defending life, liberty, and propriety. Locke affirmed that the claim for tolerance. Locke affirmed that the image for tolerance is instead to separate the state from the church, a revolutionary idea from the political scenario of the time.